Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight for our Diverse Ed World Book Day event. Some of you have been with us now for almost 2 hours, so it's almost time for dinner. And we've doubled the numbers in the last 90 minutes, where we've got quite high viewing numbers now. So thank you, everyone who has tuned in. This fourth and final panel, we're going to go from thinking about the school system to school culture, because the authors and the books we're going to be exploring are really about the culture of the educational workplaces in which we are contributing and occupying. So I'm delighted to be joined by Lucy, Nadia and Kit. Kit's counter-author, Alison, can't be here, but I know she's here in spirit. So similar format, we're going to have 5 minutes for each of you to talk about the book you've co-produced, that you've published. We've got the audience listening. I'm going to then field any questions or create the questions myself, and we're then going to wrap up tonight's event. So Kit, I'm going to start with you then. It's lovely to see you. I know we've had a few emails over the last few months. It's nice to have a face for the email address. Welcome, and tell us all about the book that you've read. But you need to unmute so we can hear you first.
Yeah, you've got me, and actually Alison's the classy one, so you've got me instead. So our book is Curious Not Furious, and it's about being curious, not furious. Really, it came about for several reasons. Actually, lots of people who we'd been working with and providing training in the staff, for staff, school staff, but we work in lots of different areas. So we work in social care and health, and with the police. So we work across anyone who works with or cares for children, actually. And we know that there's loads of staff who understand about neurodifference and want neuro-inclusive schools. And they're desperate for that, but they're not quite sure how to actually make that happen. And in lots of the training we had done, because we work with parents and carers and foster carers and schools and police, and lots of people have said, you need to write a book about your approach, something which is really simple. So we kind of, the kind of book we wanted to write was a book that a really shattered teacher or parent might be able to pick up at the end of a long day and read a few pages. And it was a difficult one because there was part of me thinking it needs to have really good references throughout. And I do a little bit of work for the University of Sussex. So there was part of me thinking, oh, they're all going to say, what? There's no referencing for that. But in the end, we decided that formality is quite a barrier. And all of our work is about making it really accessible. And our work is about how we can be neuro-inclusive and a whole school approach, but not just something different for those children who struggle. And I think it creates a different culture. If you're talking about staff room culture, it's the same approach with staff as it is with young people. It's the same approach with colleagues. It's about saying, I wonder why they're finding that a bit difficult. Or I wonder why I wonder why that member of staff finds it so much easier to implement that new thing than that member of staff. I wonder what that's all about. So understanding it comes from neuroscience. So it's about neuroscience and psychology and coaching all wrapped up in one, and has got this big evidence base that I suppose we kind of simplify and say, let's not make it where you then have to translate. If you're working with a young person or with an adult, actually, let's not have theory that person's then got to go, well, that's a theory. How do I do that? And I think that was probably, I come from a background of headship as well. And I think when I look at the CPD I had back in, and I was in schools for 25, I think it was 91 or 92. I must look it up sometime. I did a PGCE, in those days where then you spent the next few years actually learning how to teach. And it felt as if the CPD was about the theory, but not necessarily. And this is what it means to whole school processes and whole school culture. And so really enabling leaders and teachers to say, this is how you would actually do it. So it's very practical. It's called a practical toolkit because it's very practical. And it's we have a lot of visuals and a lot of props, because we believe, like this one, we believe it's it's the hook for people, isn't it? When we start with lots of props, people start saying, it gives them a hook for it. And it enables also those people who are non-verbal to manage too. So yeah, that's our book. And we actually did it in an unusual way. In fact, I'd heard about Barbara Cartland never wrote a single word herself either typing or writing. And Alison had really wanted to write a book, and we'd been nagged about it for some time. And I kept thinking, oh, that seems like a really big thing to do. I kind of had it in my head, but it was actually getting, I don't know why, because I did a master's and I managed to write thousands of words for that. So, but there was some kind of blockage. So we decided over lockdown, we would meet each week on Zoom. I lay on a couch and I went blah, 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 blah. And Alison, who's really clever at these sorts of things, she tapped. And then we did it as a back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So she took lots of stuff that we'd written about our approach, and then we did it in that way. So it was, it felt, for me, quite pain-free, but Alison might say something very different.
It felt like therapy. That's what I'm hearing, Kit. I love this image of you lying on the couch whilst Alison types it all up. But as a process, we're definitely giving ideas tonight about different ways to birth a book. So thank you so much for joining us, Kit. I'm going to swing over to Lucy, and we'll come back to you in the Q&A. Lucy, I think you're down the road from me. Are you in Bristol?
Yes, close to Bristol. So I work at Bristol University and I live in Somerset. So yes, I think we are quite close.
I'm in Bath, so I think I could probably hear you if I my window. But it's fab to finally meet you. So over to you, Lucy, to tell us all about your book.
Okay, so my book is called Reimagining the Diary, Reflective Practice as a Positive Tool for Educator Wellbeing. It's nearly its 1 year anniversary. It was published by John Katz on the 10th of March, which I can't quite believe. And the book basically came from the idea that diary keeping is talked a lot about in other books and the benefits around diary keeping or journaling, but there wasn't a whole book dedicated to it. And I felt that that needed to change. So I lead a research project that's all about opening up the diary and using it as a creative and multimodal space that's fun and moves beyond writing. So I wanted to sort of capture that research in a book and share some of those ideas with others so that they too could reap the benefits around diary keeping and use it so that they could flourish inside and outside the classroom, essentially. I think we talk a lot about well-being, but sometimes it's hard to know what well-being actually means to us personally. It's that term that's used a lot. And, you know, there's the saying that one person's well-being dream is another person's well-being nightmare. And I truly believe that a diary or journal can help you to find out what well-being means to you, to tailor it, to personalize it, and to capture what you can do then to fill up your well-being cup, however big or small that might be. So the book offers some of the key benefits around diary keeping and journaling, which come from, you know, my 5-year research project, namely catharsis, so that act of downloading. So Kit was talking about lying on the couch and that therapy. So a diary is definitely that, but also celebration. And that's something that we as educators probably don't think about. We aren't very good at celebrating ourselves and all of our achievements, and a diary is a great way to do that and to build up that evidence bank around what you're doing and how well you're doing in any aspect of your life. And it's also a space to gain perspective on different events and situations, which can be really helpful in terms of letting go of something and moving on and thinking about your why and your internal compass. So I share lots about those key benefits, drawing on findings from the project, but I also talk about how to overcome some of the barriers around diary keeping and journaling, namely time and motivation. And so I draw on a lot of work around habit formation, you know, things like James Clear's Atomic Habits, which is great. And we talk about how to put your diary into your calendar, to make it a top priority, to make it visible. But essentially what this book is about is, in order to help you to make it a habit, it's about opening up the diary beyond writing. So my work is very much showing people that a diary can be anything you want it to be. We can let go of the shoulds around diary keeping, and we can bring in things other than writing, such as drawing and audio recordings and scrapbooking and tracking the weather, etc., using emojis, anything you want. If it's a scrapbook of your life, have fun with it. So I suppose my book is giving people permission to do that and to give them lots of practical ideas on how to approach it. And in terms of my publishing journey, I was very lucky and it happened very quickly. So I was in contact with Kat Howard and Jamie Tom, and they were working with John Katz and said that they might be interested in it. So they put me in touch. I shared an idea for the book and they said yes. And then it happened really quickly. And I'm very pleased that John Katz published it, because I am an academic. I work in a university, but I wanted this to be something really accessible and practical. And there's lots of reflective activities for people to actually sort of scribble inside the book and for it to be usable. And very much, I don't want it to be pristine by the end of a reading. I want it to be dog-eared and have lots of things in it.
Fabulous, Lucy. Thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. I'm going to swing over to Nadia to hear about Nadia's book, and then we'll open it out. And Nadia and I are doing tonight together virtually, and I get to meet you in person again on Saturday.
I'm looking forward to it.
Twice in 1 week.
I'm very excited about Saturday. And thank you for inviting me, Hannah. My book is called The Unhappy Head Teacher. I wrote this book in response to working with lots and lots of head teachers. I'm a former head teacher myself. I now am a coach, and I started to see patterns in what was going wrong in headship for many head teachers. And in a way, I feel like this is the head teacher version of Yamina's book. And many of the themes that she touched on, I do too. So, you know, why are so many head teachers leaving the profession? I've identified 2 key reasons. One of them is boredom and one of them is burnout. And so the book aims to address those 2 things really by looking at what well-being means to you, but also learning how to find your voice as a way of staying engaged in the role. And you know, it's very much written from the heart of my drawing on my own experience and that of my clients, but wanting to make sure that head teachers don't feel alone, and that's what I'm aiming to do. There is a mixture of practical tools and knowledge building, I would say, and it's got a nice little summary at the end of each chapter for people who haven't got time to read a book, like head teachers that don't. Like, I certainly didn't when I was a head teacher. I have time for books, but I do now. So in terms of how it was born, is a bit of an odd story, really. My mum sadly was terminally ill, and I spent a lot of time with her for about a year in the last year of her life. And my mum has an extraordinary story. And so I worked with her and a publisher to write her life story in the time that she was ill. And during this time, the 2 of them started nagging me and telling me, you've got to write your book. This is, you know, like your. And so in these sessions where my mum would be recorded and the editor would write and I would chip in about her life. And my mum used to be editor of the Women's Voice in the 60s and had all these incredible stories. And they were fun sessions, and it was remarkably inspiring experience. But I started to put sort of like true primary school teacher style, like A2 sheets up on my mum's bedroom wall and plan out my book and sort of cheekily just ask for their input. And so we kind of, in addition to my mum's work, we came up with a blueprint for this. And so it felt very much a way of honouring that time as well. And my mum was saying to me at the time, you've got to write a book because that's how you reach more heads, and you've got to let them know that their voice matters. And I think that's my message, is that we are put on in every direction in headship. And that if we functioned in a system that listened more to head teachers, I think that the school system would be less broken. And that's what I hope people will take from reading the book.
That's a beautiful story, Nadia. I love the duality of your mum's legacy being published, but you like birthing your own book at the same time. It's
it was
family legacy. It's beautiful, and I'm assuming that your book came out once your mum had passed, but your mum was part of the process as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it wasn't long after she died, actually, that it came. Well, it was a few months after she died, so it all seemed a bit strange. And her book is still in manuscript because I can't bring myself to read it.
Oh, I can imagine.
I owe it to her. Now I've said this out loud, I probably owe it to her. I've got 2 or 3 publishers that are quite interested in my mum's book, so I do need to do something with it. But yeah, she'd have been so delighted that I did it. She probably would have told me it was a load of rubbish, but she would have found things wrong with my English, I'm sure. But yeah, it was a fabulous experience, Hannah.
Well, if you want some accountability, maybe you come back next year with your mum's book.
That's such a great idea. I've got
or International Women's Day event next year.
Yeah,
you share your mum's book. There you go.
It's a feminist book, I tell you. Yeah.
Beautiful. So let me come back with some questions then. Kit, I loved what you were saying about like formality being a barrier sometimes to us finding a voice. And we talked about the imposter syndrome on the last panel. We often perhaps like create artificial barriers about how a book should be written, presented. and this idea of it being quite formal, quite academic. Can you just talk a little bit more about how you consciously stepped away from that or consciously disrupted this idea of formality? But you need to unmute so we can hear you.
Sorry, I'm not good at this.
Got you.
I think that the issue around formality is something that's sort of followed me through my professional career, actually. That kind of, I don't know if it's to do with my child. I'm a vicar's daughter, and there was a lot of formality when I was a child, you know, and the bishop came around and we had to sit very up. And early in my career, there was a very big focus on formality. And I think sometimes it was to the detriment of professionalism. And I think sometimes there was a kind of cloak of what people called professionalism. It was actually formality. You know, sometimes I'll give an example of that. Early on in my career, there was someone in the next door classroom to me, and she screamed at me. And actually, a lot of her practice. And first of all, she must have felt really unhappy. And I look back and I think, wow, I wish she'd been supported better by school leaders at the time. But I think there was this, we shouldn't at that point, and we're going back, you know, I'm in my 50s, so we're going back a while. But there was a kind of, we have to be formal because that's what school's all about. And I think there was definitely an air of, you know, peer group feel if we write something which is really accessible enough for parents and carers and a whole range of different professionals working with children. But then I was overridden by the fact that I really believe that there's so many different approaches and books about how we can support young people who are struggling, and we don't need to make children feel bad in order to help them to do better. And when we look at the number of exclusions and suspensions and detentions, the amount of time and effort spent on what people call behaviour in school, and actually having another book, I believe we needed something that was really practical and something which was a whole school approach, because I think there's plenty out there which are kind of interventions for young people, but for me it's much more about a language which is a language for everybody, and a language. It was interesting. I think it kind of replicates some of the things that you both have said, Lucy and Nadia, about, you know, I'm a real believer in having structures and a shared language across the community. And our book was very much, our approach was very much originally designed to be the glue which kind of brought different professionals together, and parents and carers and school. And I'd sat around many tables in the days where you'd have a TAF or TAC meeting where there would be someone from CAMS. I know everyone's like, really? But there was enough capacity then. There'll be the paediatrician, there's someone, a clinical psychologist, someone from CAMS, all different professions. But actually we all had different languages. We all had different, I think that's still a problem. We've got these different paperwork, different forms. And so the book was partly about that, about something which was accessible for all and wasn't a barrier for some, you know, some members of that group, you know, so youth workers and early help workers and parents and carers and foster carers. So yeah, it was very much about that, and making sure that people, there wasn't anyone. It's a bit like you look at governors and you think, well, who are the governors of schools? Do they really represent our young people in schools? Often not, because actually there's a big barrier for lots of people because of the way governing body meetings are held. Where, you know, so there's so many people in our community, they're like, well, I don't know, sit around that table and what does it mean, AOB, and what all these papers and the agenda. So I'm a real believer in making and the processes of education accessible for everybody.
Yeah, thank you for that, Kit. And you've picked up the word I wanted to come back to you on, Lucy, this idea of finding and removing barriers to make things more accessible. Like, that's what I've heard you've done there, that we have quite a formal understanding of what a diary is, and you've kind of like exploded it, you've disrupted it. Just tell us a little bit more about that conscious process.
I like the idea of being disruptive. I'm not normally called a disruptive person, but I'll take that, Hannah, so thank you. So yeah, I think that a bit like wellbeing and some of what Kit was sharing, diary is a really heavily loaded term. It has a lot of cultural, historical, literary baggage. We've studied diaries at school. We have a template for a diary. And that can be quite restrictive because it brings a lot of shoulds around diary keeping. It should be a dated entry. It should start Dear Diary. It should be written in paragraphs, etc. And that can really limit what you get out of the diary. And I really believe that a diary is such a powerful tool, and it doesn't have to be expensive. You don't need lots of equipment. It can be for anybody. But if we want to help people get the most from their diary keeping practice, then we need to let go of those shoulds around diary keeping and expand it beyond writing. That's not to say there isn't a place for writing. There definitely is, but it can be bullet points, and it can be, you know, a Twitter post or an Instagram post or whatever, but it can also include visual and audio entries as well. And I think the more creative we are with our diaries and the more types of entries we use within them, the more we get to know ourselves and our wellbeing needs. And in the book, I draw on the work of Gunther Kress, who is a social semiotician, and he talks about multimodality and this idea that we communicate through different mediums and different approaches. And to use one medium, such as writing, means you'll only get so far in your communication with yourself and your, you know, and others, your inner and outer world. So therefore, if we want to deepen that communication and strengthen it, then we need to use lots of different approaches. And my book is very much about that. And if you don't like writing, that's fine. Your diary doesn't need to contain it. Make it work for you, because the more of you bring to your diary and those interests and hobbies that you have, the more likely you are to keep the habit going and to get the most from it.
Yeah, I love that, Lucy. And that links back to what Nadia said about helping people find their voice, and head teachers' voice as being important, but most head teachers being too busy to read or to write. I'm curious, Nadia, about how your books landed and resonated with your target audience, and like what kind of feedback have you had about them?
I mean, overwhelmingly positive. I keep waiting for somebody to tell me I don't know what I'm talking about. And I think that's because I based it on, you know, 4 years of working with, you know, hundreds of head teachers. And so, the same things keep coming up, and the same, I keep doing the same work. So far, I've had a phenomenal response to it, and lots of dialogue around, about what is the future of schools and where do head teachers feature in that. Going back to your previous panel, there's also something about putting head teachers being brave enough to put themselves forward, and kind of increasing their influence. I think that I hope that I think that there is evidence that it's empowering people. They read it and they feel like they see themselves in it, and they see that all is not lost.
Yeah, I love that. Have you encouraged any of them to like put pen to paper and find their voice? Has it led to other writing projects out of interest?
So actually it has. And what started to happen as a result of this is I've opened up a blog space for head teachers on my website. Teachers who do head teachers who do programs with me, but just people who wrote the book. It was kind of a challenge in the book is to write and to codify what you do. You know, if you've got something that's working for autistic children in your school, tell people about it. If you've got something that's working for families, tell people about it, because that's how you increase your influence. There's a whole chapter called broadening your horizon by broadening that of others, or, you know, it's along those lines. And it's a growing blog space. People keep rewrite the book and often submit a blog to me. And I'm hoping it's like a sea of great things that schools are doing, but they're kind of, you know, as blogs are, they're a short snapshot of things to be proud of and things to show off about in headship.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was a head, I blogged once a month, and I used to host other people's blogs, because I think sometimes people worry about writing and people reading it, but like it feels quite heavy to like buy your own blog domain or to have like your own space. Doesn't it? Like I remember the first time I did that, I felt like, oh god, this feels a bit. So actually holding a space for other voices to be amplified. Absolutely. You feel like you're part of something else, maybe.
Yeah, and I have had a couple of people have actually written to me saying, I don't want this published, but I wanted to share it with you. And that's, I'm holding that space without sharing it. I mean, it's wonderful. I wish they would. I wish everybody would, because I think, you know, building voice is imperative if we're going to stabilise this broken system we're functioning within.
Absolutely. And your title, Kit and Alison, Curious Not Furious. My mantra is curious not critical. So in the work I do with schools, as soon as you get critical, people shut down. I want to talk about inclusion. So trying to help people to lead with curiosity rather than criticality is one of my mantras. Where did your title come from, Curious Not Furious? You need to unmute.
I'm a mantra person. I don't think I recognise that until, but although actually ex-colleagues say, oh, you had that mantra and that mantra. So I think I do like a mantra. And Curious Not Furious was a very early one. A later one, I think people always think of when you're using coaching and you're being curious rather than critical or furious, they think it might be permissive. And so another mantra that I use regularly in schools is insistent, persistent, consistent with a bucket full of kindness. That actually you can be insistent and you can be persistent. You should be consistent. That's really important. But you can have a bucket full of kindness when you hold, because no one rises to low expectations, whether it's of staff or students or young people and children. So it's about holding that as a kind of in your head all the time. And one of our other mantras is good for me, good for you, good for everyone. So, coming away from this kind of rules-based, boundaries-based, and actually saying it's just about helping young people to learn how to be a great member of, whether it's a partner or a neighbour or a employee, employer, friend, that they're always thinking in terms of good for me, good for you, good for everyone. I think we could do that.
You need a T-shirt series, Kit. I feel like there's some T-shirts,
a
bit of merch.
The brain test is another one. I talk about, that's me dropping props. The need you have to beat your brain best. So that's another one. Yeah, I should get a whole series of T-shirts. Yeah.
Seriously, I think you need T-shirts. I'm going to wrap it up there. Just say a massive thank you for the three of you waiting for the whole event to be at the last panel. But thank you for your contributions, your reflections, but also what you've created. Yeah, hold them up. Hold up your books so people can recognise those front covers. Thank you very much. I'm going to send out all the links with the recording. But thank you for joining me tonight, and thank you for the work you do.
Thank you for having
Nadia, I'll see you in Cambridge on Saturday.
Can't wait.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Bye.